Hey everyone, my name is Maggie Leonard. Welcome to our Solidarity Snack Time series. I'm with you today to talk with you about understanding boundaries and finding freedom. So, poor boundaries are where one person forgets where their responsibilities stop and another person's responsibilities begin, or vice versa. So you might find in any relationship that you might be the person whose boundaries are being violated all the time, that someone is doing more for you when you could actually be empowered to do the work yourself. Or perhaps you're someone that's always helping others. Um, and you do for them what maybe they could be doing for themselves. It's a normal behavior plus. We do too much or care too much, we feel too little or overly engage. So one person has let another person's behavior affect him or her and is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior, perhaps, kind of micromanaging what's going on. Setting boundaries is really hard, and there are a lot of different barriers to setting healthy boundaries. So it could be anything from repressing old emotions to not really having a sense of one's own feelings. Perhaps there's this dependency on another person. Oftentimes, if our boundaries were violated as children, then we become accustomed to that. It's easier to have our boundaries violated as adults. It could stem from abuse, or maybe even not understanding what one's limits are, how much one can handle, because they keep on going above and beyond to help others without paying attention to how it's affecting them. Poor parental role modeling could be at the root of this, or perhaps low self esteem. And that could go in either direction. Maybe someone does a lot to help because they're trying to earn someone else's love, or maybe someone lets another person intrude upon them because they are not really sure, they don't trust themselves to do the work themselves or to be able to have that positive outcome. It could also be due to poor communication skills, shame, or maybe even people pleasing. So boundaries require a sense of self-awareness, of self-love. They require us to have honest and open communication, which means sometimes we have to say hard things. And it also requires that we either kind of align with or step into the power that we hold. Boundaries aren't only about how people treat us, but they're about how we treat them as well. So this is a list of what good boundaries might include. So it's anything from respecting one's privacy to not expecting or assuming, um, by actually asking someone what they need. It means that we'll do what we say we will, and if plans change, that we let the other person know. If you call someone on the phone, it might mean that you ask if now is a good time to talk, especially if you know that the conversation will be more than just a few moments. It means that we don't arrive to another person's house unannounced unless both parties agree that that's something that's okay to do. We don't borrow things without asking the other person. We pay debts on time. And if that's difficult, we have that conversation with the other person truthfully. And we tell the truth all the time. It means coming to a conversation without judgment, especially if we're asking the other person what they need. If we hear that something is going on, we don't confront the other person unless we're able to verify facts. Having good boundaries means that we don't push our beliefs on others, that we call it normal hours unless there's an emergency. Gossiping is not a way of showing that we have healthy boundaries. And also, we don't pester or call too often or ask for inappropriate favors. So, there are a lot of different ways in which we can see boundaries needing to be set, lots of different ways in which this takes form in our lives. And it's not a boundary if it can't be enforced. Sometimes that might mean that you have to leave a place or that you ask someone else to leave. Um, it might mean that you don't pick up your phone or you block a number. But enforcement is really key to having a boundary. It's about communicating what we'll do if that boundary is violated, and then actually doing whatever we've said that we would do. So, in establishing boundaries, we need to name what our limits are. And it's really helpful to know what our limits are, what those things are that we can or can't do, what we have energy for, um, what we have time for. And a part of figuring out what those limits are, we have to turn into our feelings. And once we've figured that out, we have to be direct with the other person. We don't tiptoe around it. We state what it is that we need or that we don't need. And in that, we give ourselves permission and we practice self awareness. It's important to realize that different people will have different boundaries. So, what has happened in your past and what's going on in your present moment will directly impact the types of boundaries that you need to set with other people. Your self care is a priority here, your health, your well being. Those things don't have to work against another person, but it is important that you make yourself a priority. No one else can do that except for you. Seek support when you need it from loved ones who can respect the boundaries that you set, from friends or family members. Be assertive and start small. You don't have to take on the world all at once, but with practice, setting boundaries will become easier. And setting boundaries is difficult. People will press our boundaries, especially if we had a relationship, a pattern of being with another person that did not have healthy boundaries set in it, if we have another pattern of being with them. So if someone asks you a question and it catches you off guard, you are allowed to say, "Can I get back to you on that?" You don't have to have an immediate answer when someone answers or asks you a question. Also, remember, you don't have to explain or justify your actions unless someone asks you and you want to tell them. Excuses weaken our power. You don't owe any explanations. Boundaries also include saying what we want, enjoy, and like. So you can set a boundary by telling someone that you need something from them or that you really enjoy a particular activity that you do together and you need more of it. It's not just about the negative things, it's about creating that space for positivity as well. Another suggestion is you could write yourself a letter about why you set a boundary. And you can read it to remind yourself of why you set that boundary on difficult days, because there will be days when sticking to that boundary will be difficult, where enough time will have passed that you have forgotten the stress that led you to needing to set that boundary to begin with. So write yourself a note. And like I said before, be specific about what you need if you're asking for someone to do something differently. They need to understand what they can do and what they can't do. It's not just, oh, I miss connecting with you. It's, can we have a check-in with one another at least once a week for 10 minutes or once a day for 5 minutes? Give them something that they can grasp so that the behavior can change in a way that's helpful for you. And you can also set tough limits and blocks of time to reduce the sting of whatever's happening. So maybe you tell someone that you can't see them for a week or two, and then you might check back in. Maybe it's a month. If you start with, we can never see one another ever again, you might find more resistance on their part. So take it in bite-sized pieces if that's a strategy that might work for you and might lessen the sting for them, knowing that after a week or two, you can still say, I'm not ready to see you. When we stop taking responsibility for what others can do, and when we stop allowing others to do for us what we can do, when we stop giving into any kind of manipulation, then we'll have more time and energy for ourselves and our passions. That's where our liberation lies. And remember, we're not static people. We are people invested in growth. So with time, we might test our boundaries to see if what had been right for us still is. But I think that there's a difference between when testing boundaries is a positive thing and when to avoid it. So we might test our boundaries, see if a shift is appropriate, to see if we have grown and are stronger than we had before. Maybe we're trying to bridge our interests. Periodic testing can just help us to know where we stand, or maybe it helps us to support others better by opening ourselves a little bit. Or maybe we just have an idea that we need to test out. However, if someone else is pressuring you to change what your boundary is, you're not really certain about how you're feeling about things, or maybe you're looking to return to a well-known path, one that has not produced healthy outcomes in the past. The risk of testing the boundary might not be worth whatever the perceived reward is. Only you can know what's best for you. Much of our conversation today was inspired by Melody Beattie's book, The New Codependency: Help and Guidance for Today's Generation. So if you need more help on figuring out about codependency and boundaries, check out her book. It's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to joining with you again soon for another Solidarity Snack Time. Take care, y'all.